Office thief brought down by Frozen's Let It Go. You ever hear about someone getting fired because of Frozen? No, seriously. The song Let It Go didn't just end an office feud, it ended an entire engineering career. This story comes from my dad, and it's about his best friend, my late Uncle Dale. Now Dale was the kind of guy who took petty revenge and turned it into an art form. But unlike the usual passive-aggressive workplace drama, Uncle Dale had something most office workers don't: a brilliant engineering brain, a team of equally mischievous students, and a deep-seated hatred for corporate freeloaders. This all started around Christmas, and trust me, nothing brings out the worst in people quite like holiday parties, free food, and a donation box that mysteriously keeps coming up empty. Uncle Dale wasn't about to let that slide, especially not with someone like Brad around. You'll meet Brad soon. Let's just say, if you've ever worked with someone who got their job through family connections and made everyone miserable, you already know the type. So yeah, it starts with a party fund, a tin box, and a sneaky thief. But it ends with glitter, rage, and Idina Menzel screaming, "Let it go," while someone tries to punch a donation box into silence. And no, I'm not exaggerating. Let me walk you through what happened, and why Uncle Dale is still a legend at that company, even years after he's gone. Uncle Dale was what you'd call a lifer, a senior engineer at a small but mighty firm in the Midwest. He'd been there forever, the kind of guy who knew where every wire ran, which intern would survive past probation, and exactly how much cake you needed for a company party of 45. But his influence didn't stop at the office. Dale also taught part-time at the local community college, mentoring young engineering students. Some of those kids still tell stories about him, not just because he was brilliant, but because he was hilariously unorthodox. Extra credit? Only if you solve a real-world problem with flair. Late assignment? Better come with an apology and donuts. At the office, he had two unofficial titles: the Fixer and Party Czar. That second one might sound silly, but trust me, Dale took holiday parties very seriously. Every year, he'd coordinate the Christmas celebration down to the last detail, and to help fund it, he kept a little locked tin box outside his office. No one was required to contribute, but most people did. A few bucks here and there for decorations, drinks, or prizes for the White Elephant Exchange. That box? It had been a tradition for years. People respected it. Dropping your cash in that slot meant you were part of the team. It meant you cared. So when December rolled around and Dale went to check the funds and found nothing but air, he didn't get mad. He got calculating, because Uncle Dale knew what everyone knew. People had been donating. He'd seen them do it, which could only mean one thing: someone was stealing from the party fund. And that, my friend, is when the real fun began. At first, Uncle Dale tried to stay logical. Maybe someone had taken the money out early to buy supplies. Maybe the box had been moved. Maybe a well-meaning intern just forgot to tell him. But the more he asked around, the clearer it became. No one knew anything. And worse, people had seen others dropping in bills. $10 here, $20 there, even a few generous souls who tossed in 50s. Yet the total inside the box was zero. Zilch. Nada. That's when Dale's gears really started turning. Someone was stealing. And it wasn't just theft. It was personal. This was a breach of something sacred. You don't mess with engineers' party funds. You just don't. And then Brad walked around the corner. Brad. Even just saying his name out loud makes people groan. He was the owner's nephew, which basically meant he had immunity from everything short of murder. Incompetent? Check. Condescending? Double check. Entitled beyond reason? Oh, you have no idea. Brad was one of those guys who never got told no growing up. And by the time he landed at the firm, he'd mastered the art of doing just enough to avoid getting fired, while making everyone else's life miserable. He'd interrupt meetings, talk over senior staff, and once referred to a female engineer as sweetheart during a presentation. Spoiler alert, that didn't go over well. So when Brad strolled past the donation box with that smug little half smile, like he knew something nobody else did, Dale's instincts kicked in. There was no proof, but something about Brad's timing, his expression, his complete lack of interest in the party he'd still show up to and mooch off of. That's when Uncle Dale knew. Brad wasn't just an office nuisance. Brad was the Grinch who stole Christmas. And now, it was time to catch him in the act. Now most people would have marched straight into HR or maybe cornered Brad with a few passive-aggressive jabs in the break room. But Uncle Dale wasn't most people. He was an engineer, and engineers don't accuse, they prove. So he started planning. First step, surveillance. He grabbed one of those doorbell cameras, the kind with motion detection and automatic cloud storage, and mounted it discreetly just above the donation box. He angled it perfectly so it wouldn't raise any suspicion, and then waited for the weekend to end. Monday morning, the office returned to its usual chaos. But Dale wasn't done yet. Oh no, he wanted bait. So he asked a coworker, loud enough for others to hear, to casually say, "Hey Dale, I dropped $100 in the party box. Hope it helps." It was a setup, of course. The box was still empty. Then he waited. 2 days later, he got a notification on his phone. Motion detected. He clicked the video, and there it was. Brad, looking around like a cartoon villain, opened the box, saw it was empty, and, get this, threw it against the wall in frustration, like a toddler who didn't find candy in a piñata. That was all the confirmation Dale needed. Brad had been counting on that money, which meant he'd been stealing it all along. At this point, Dale could have gone straight to the boss, presented the footage, demanded justice. But where's the fun in that? No. Uncle Dale had a better idea. One that would involve his students, some minor musical torture, and a box that would become the stuff of legend. Uncle Dale wasn't someone who rushed to tattle. It wasn't out of fear. He had job security, tenure, and the loyalty of half the office. It was more about the principle of it all. Because if you're going to stop a thief like Brad, someone who got away with everything just by flashing a last name, you don't just stop him. You humiliate him. You make it memorable. You make it stick. And so Dale did what any deviously brilliant engineer would do. He turned it into a challenge. He walked into class that week with a sparkle in his eye and said, "All right, folks, extra. Credit opportunity. I need you to design me a rig. A very specific kind. Think decoy donation box. Your job is to make it as annoying as possible when someone opens it. The more obnoxious, the more points." Naturally, the students perked. Up extra credit for chaos? Say no more. They started brainstorming like mad scientists. Someone suggested glitter bombs. Someone else pitched compressed air bursts. But the idea that made Dale laugh the hardest, and therefore got the green light, came from a shy sophomore in Tweed and the back row. She raised her hand and said, "What if it played Let It Go?" You could hear the silence in the room as everyone processed the horror of that song. It had once been beloved. Now, it was the anthem of parents slowly losing their sanity and coworkers on the edge of snapping. It was perfect. Dale approved it on the spot. Bonus credit to anyone who could make it loud and unescapable. The students got to work, armed with nothing but spare parts, musical greeting cards, and a dangerous amount of creativity. 1 week later, the trap was ready, and Brad was about to meet his match in the form of Idina Menzel. The students didn't just meet the challenge. They engineered it into a masterpiece of public humiliation. First, they cracked open a few musical greeting cards to extract the sound module, the kind that starts playing a song when you open it. Then, they amplified the speaker using a plastic chamber to act like a mini sound cone, maxing out the volume. But the real genius? They rewired the thing so that it wouldn't stop playing once activated. Normally, those modules only play a short clip. Not this one. This one played Let It Go in full, on loop. And just to add frosting to the chaos cake, they glued the module deep inside the tin box using industrial-strength epoxy. No ripping it out unless you had a blowtorch and a death wish. Then came the locking mechanism. The hinge was rigged to click open easily. But closing it again? You'd need to press a secret button hidden along the side of the box. Without that, it wouldn't latch, and the song would just keep on blaring. The final step was a fresh coat of paint and a convincing label. Holiday Party Fund. Thank you. Dale took one look, smiled like a kid on Christmas morning, and said, "I love it. We're going live." The next day, he placed the rigged box on the table outside his office, exactly where the original had been. Then, for added bait, he made a little show of pulling out his wallet in front of a few coworkers and saying, "Well, would you look at that? Someone already dropped in $50. What a generous bunch." Then he stepped back into his office, phone camera app open, and waited. It didn't take long. Barely an hour later, Dale's phone pinged. Motion detected. He opened the live feed, and there he was. Brad, scanning the hallway, glancing side to side like a budget Bond villain. He approached the donation box, hands twitching like he was about to perform open-heart surgery. Then, with the confidence of someone who'd done this before, he popped the lid open. "Let it go! Let it go!" The hallway erupted in song. Loud, echoing, absolutely inescapable. Brad flinched like he'd touched an electric fence. He immediately slammed the box shut, or tried to, but it wouldn't close. He pressed harder, still wouldn't budge. So, now he's there, red-faced, furiously wrestling a tin box while Idina Menzel belts out one of the most overplayed songs in modern history. He looked around, panicked, tried yanking the lid shut, tried flipping the box upside down, even tried covering it with his jacket. Nothing worked. The noise was drawing attention. First, a few heads popped out of cubicles, then a couple of interns wandered into the hallway. Soon, half the floor was watching Brad fight for his dignity against a children's movie anthem. And that's when his uncle, the owner of the company, stepped out of his office. You could hear the whole floor go quiet, except, of course, for "Let it go, can't hold it back anymore." Brad froze. His uncle took one look at the donation box, now dented from all the struggling, and raised an eyebrow. Then slowly he said, "Brad, my office, now." And just like that, Brad picked up the cursed box, still singing, and walked the slowest walk of shame in corporate history. 15 minutes later, Brad came out of his uncle's office carrying a cardboard box. Not the donation box, a real one, the kind with all your stuff in it. His desk was already being cleared out. A few awkward co-workers looked away. Others watched with barely hidden satisfaction. Nobody said a word. Uncle Dale, of course, stayed in his office. He didn't. Need to gloat. He already knew what was in Brad's file now. Do not rehire. Do not recommend. Brad packed up his things, walked straight out the front door, and never set foot in that office again. The donation box, by the way, still singing. Even after Brad had hurled it at the wall one last time, hard enough to leave a dent. But that thing was built like a tank. Idina Menzel didn't even skip a beat. And the best part? Uncle Dale didn't stop there. Oh no. He saved everything. Because remember the camera? It caught all of it. Brad sneaking in, popping the box, panicking, trying to smother the music, and finally storming off like a defeated cartoon villain. Which brings us to the Christmas party. The company Christmas party that year. Legendary decorations, catered food, drinks. But the highlight wasn't the gift exchange or even the spiked eggnog. It was when Uncle Dale dimmed the lights, wheeled out a projector, and said, "Before we start the raffle, I have a little video to share." The screen flickered on, and there it was. Brad, in full 1080p, opening the box. And then, cue music. Let it go! Let it go! The timing was perfect. The video played just as the music swelled, synced like a music video. You saw Brad's face twist in confusion, then panic. You saw the box refusing to close, his frantic attempts to smother it. And finally, the exact moment his uncle appeared behind him. The room howled with laughter. Even the CEO, Brad's own uncle, couldn't help but chuckle. "That's what he gets," someone muttered near the buffet. Finally! By the time the video ended, the applause was thunderous. Someone started a slow clap. One of the interns wiped away tears. And Dale? He just sat there with a satisfied smile, sipping cider like a man who had engineered not just a trap, but justice. It wasn't just about catching a thief. It was about sending a message. Don't mess with the party fund. And definitely don't mess with an engineer who knows how to wire a sound module. Uncle Dale passed away a few years ago, but this story lives on, retold at family gatherings, company parties, and every time someone asks, "What's the best petty revenge you've ever seen?" To his students, he was a mentor. To his coworkers, a hero. To Brad, probably a recurring nightmare. And honestly, I think that's exactly how Dale would have wanted it, because he didn't just love solving problems, he loved teaching lessons. He didn't believe in yelling or fighting or filing HR reports. No, he believed in something far more powerful, a well-executed trap and the unstoppable force of a Disney soundtrack. That donation box? It's still around. Someone found it in the storage room years later, still glued shut, still dented, still faintly humming when you shake it. A little office relic that says, "Don't mess with tradition, and don't ever steal from the holiday fund." Rest in peace, Uncle Dale. You truly let it go, and made sure Brad never could.
You've heard the case. While you consider your verdict, the court calls the next case to order.
My ex cheated with my sister, so I aborted his child. I, 30F, was with John, 32M, for over 4 years. We weren't perfect. Who is? But I thought we had something solid. We'd weathered job changes, a miscarriage 2 years ago, and even a brief long-distance stint when I had to relocate, temporarily for work. It hadn't always been easy, but I truly believed we were committed to growing through it together. Looking back now, I realize I missed some signs. There were nights when he was more distant than usual, moments where he'd seem preoccupied, and this creeping sense that he was somewhere else mentally, or maybe even emotionally. But every time I asked, he brushed it off as stress or work, fatigue. And I believed him. I wanted to believe him. The truth shattered everything. One Saturday night, my sister Lauren, 28F, called me in tears. I assumed something had happened, maybe a breakup or a fight with Mom, but what she confessed, it broke me. She told me she had slept with John. Not just some nameless stranger, not just a random woman, my sister. It was a one-night stand, she said. A moment of weakness, one she regretted immediately. But John? He didn't sound remorseful at all. In fact, when I confronted him, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "We both knew this wasn't working anymore. The spark's been gone for a while." The spark was gone, maybe for him. But I had been trying. I had been fighting for us. And instead of having a difficult but honest conversation with me, he chose to betray me in the most gut-wrenching way, with my own blood. They didn't even try to deny it. In fact, within a few weeks of our breakup, they made their relationship public, as if I was the one holding them back. As if what they did was just the natural conclusion of something already dying. I moved out of our shared apartment and cut them both off. I didn't scream. I didn't key his car. I didn't blow up Lauren's phone with rage texts. I went quiet. But inside, I was destroyed. Betrayal from a partner is one thing. Betrayal from your sister, that's another kind of pain entirely. And just when I thought I was starting to rebuild, to breathe again, something else hit me. I was pregnant. When I saw those 2 pink lines, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It felt like a cruel joke from the universe. After everything, the betrayal, the emotional collapse, the humiliation, now this, a baby, my first instinct wasn't even fear, it was numbness. I sat on the bathroom floor for what felt like an hour, just staring at the test. I kept waiting. For it to change, for it to say something else, something easier. I was angry, not at the baby, of course, but at the situation, at John, at Lauren, at myself, for still somehow caring what any of them would think. I didn't want to hide it from him. I figured he had a right to know. So I did the right thing. I called him. Big mistake. The second I told him I was pregnant, he exploded. No hesitation, no concern, no pause to even ask if I was okay. Just pure, unfiltered rage. He accused me of trying to sabotage his new relationship. Said I was trying to trap him. Told me I was jealous and pathetic, and that I needed to move on like he had. Then he hung up. Blocked me on everything. For a while I just sat there with the phone still in my hand. Stunned. I hadn't expected him to be excited, but I also hadn't expected that level of hatred. It was like I was talking to a stranger. A cruel, hateful stranger who used to share my bed. Still, I tried to give him a chance. I emailed him, texted from a new number, even messaged him on a platform I knew he rarely checked. Nothing got through without being met with anger or silence. Eventually, I wrote one final email. This time, I included a photo of the pregnancy test. I told him he had exactly 1 month to contact me, to talk like an adult, like a co-parent, like a human being. I told him if I heard nothing, I would terminate the pregnancy. I was clear, calm, and painfully honest. It wasn't a threat. It was a boundary. And then I waited. The weeks crawled by. Every day I checked my email like clockwork. Every ding from my phone made my heart jolt. A small, delusional part of me hoped he'd come to his senses, that he'd realize this was bigger than our drama, bigger than his new relationship, bigger than his ego. But silence has a sound, and I heard it loud and clear. I went to my first doctor's appointment alone, confirmed the pregnancy. Got a folder full of pamphlets and prenatal care instructions I didn't ask for. The nurse was kind, but I could tell she thought I looked distant, maybe even cold. I wasn't. I was just trying to survive. Meanwhile, my job was ramping up in ways I never expected. I had just been promoted, something I'd worked toward for almost 3 years. It meant more money, more responsibility, and the real possibility of relocating to another city within the year. I was on the cusp of something I'd fought hard to earn, but I also knew that if I went through with the pregnancy, I'd likely be doing it alone. No partner, no father figure, no co-parenting plan, and certainly no help from John, who had chosen to ghost me in favor of playing house with my sister. And that's when I realized I wasn't just deciding about a baby, was deciding about me. I thought about what kind of mother I'd be if I resented the life I gave up. I thought about how unfair it would be to bring a child into a world where their father wanted nothing to do with them, and their aunt was the reason their parents broke up. What kind of story would that child inherit? I made the appointment. Wasn't rushed. It wasn't emotional in the way people assume. I sat with the choice for days. I cried. I prayed. I sat on my bed for hours, not moving, not eating. But in the end, I knew what I had to do. A month passed. John never called. So I followed through. Afterwards, I sat in my car in the parking lot of the clinic and just stared out the windshield. My hands trembled a little. There was no dramatic breakdown, just a heavy, cold stillness in my chest. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but it was mine. I didn't go home right away. I parked by the water, a quiet spot I used to visit when I needed to think. The same spot John and I once sat together during a rainstorm, talking about baby names we liked. Back when things were different. Back when I thought love could fix anything. This time, I sat alone. I thought I'd feel relief. Maybe a rush of clarity or certainty. But instead, I felt hollow. Not regretful, just emptied out. Like my body had caught up to what my heart had been dragging around for weeks. Loss, confusion, exhaustion. And despite all that, I knew I'd done what was right for me. I didn't regret the choice. I regretted the circumstances that led to it. The betrayal, the abandonment, the cruel timing of it all. I had wanted a family once. I had wanted his child once, but not like this. Not in chaos, not without love. That night, I finally posted something on social media. I didn't go into graphic detail. I simply wrote, "Sometimes, choosing yourself feels like loss, but it's still choosing." And I chose me. I didn't name names. I didn't mention John or Lauren. I wasn't trying to make a statement, just trying to breathe, to release something. A few hours later, I got a call. Blocked number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me swipe. It was John. His voice was low, shaken. Did you go through with it?" I hesitated. Yes. He was silent for a beat. Then his voice cracked. He started yelling, not with rage, with grief, accusations, mixed with sobs. "How could you do this to me? That was my child too. You didn't even ask me. You just took them away." And that was the moment I realized something important. He hadn't reached out for me. He hadn't called to apologize. He hadn't cared enough to respond when it mattered. Now that the decision was done, now that the power was gone, he wanted to play the victim. I let him scream for a while. Not because he deserved the space, but because I needed to hear it. I needed to hear how quickly he could twist the truth to make himself the wounded party. It confirmed everything I already knew about him. When I finally spoke, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I was calm, eerily calm. You blocked me, John. You hung up when I told you I was pregnant. I gave you time. I gave you options. And you gave me nothing. He tried to interrupt. Something about how he was in shock and needed space. But I kept going. I told you what I planned to do. You didn't care until it was too late. And now you want to make this about you? You didn't want this baby, John. You just didn't want me to make the decision without you. There's a difference. Silence. Then I said what had been building in my chest for weeks. You have Lauren now. Go build your perfect life. Go have a kid with someone you didn't cheat on me with. Just leave me out of it. He said nothing. Just breathed heavily, like he was trying not to cry again. I don't know if he was heartbroken, guilty, or just realizing that he lost control of the narrative. I hung up, and I blocked him. Again. But it didn't end there. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to go through something like this. Always pictured motherhood as something joyful, shared, a decision made with love, not in isolation. But life doesn't always hand you the version of the story you imagined. Sometimes it throws you into a plot twist you didn't ask for, and leaves you holding the pen. What haunts me most isn't the decision I made. It's the fact that I had to make it alone. John had every chance to be part of this. He had every opportunity to show up. Not even for me, but for the child we created. Instead, he weaponized silence. He used his absence as punishment. And when that failed to control me, he came crawling back with tears and accusations, hoping guilt would do what manipulation couldn't. But by then, it was already done. It was never about the baby for him. It was about power, about control, about framing himself as the victim in a situation he chose to ignore until it was convenient to care. So now I live with it. Not with shame, but with weight. The weight of a choice no woman should be forced to make alone. The weight of betrayal from not one, but two people I trusted most in the world. The weight of a future that could have been different, but wouldn't have been better. And yet, despite the noise, despite the family texts, the judgmental DMs, the whispered gossip from people who only know one side, I still come back to the same truth. I chose myself. I chose peace over chaos, autonomy over manipulation, a future I could shape instead of one I'd constantly be surviving. But still, sometimes at night, the question creeps in. Was I the a-hole, or was I just the only adult in the room?
The case has been heard. The stories have been told. Now it's your turn to judge. Leave your verdict in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. The Court of Stories is always in session.